Welcome to Keep Hustling, where we are going past the why to get to the how. I'm your host, the always hustling Aaron Gordon, aka NY Risk Advisor, aka Mr. Keep Hustling. In this podcast, we will be diving deep into the professional and personal successes of our guests to find out how they hustled through the most difficult times in their life and their development to achieve the success they've gotten to today. So buckle up for what hopes to be an amazing ride. Let's get to it. Welcome to Keep Hustling with my guest, Joe Infante. Joe, thank you so much for being here today.
Aaron, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here and an honor to be here.
You know, it is so rare that I get to talk to someone from New Jersey, from New York, from a real place in the United States. No disrespect to everyone else from godforsaken places like Nebraska, Iowa, or wherever else I'm leaving out. But I feel like this conversation is going to go to a good place because you're from Jersey. So what could possibly go wrong?
We could talk about bagels and pizza.
That's it. I will say, wasn't planning on mentioning this, but I did see a good bit, and I think you'll probably agree on this. I used to be a big toasted bagel guy.
Okay. All right. Yeah, no, I am a toasted bagel guy.
Well, I just want to say this, and maybe it'll change your view on things. I saw a whole analysis of the toasted bagel, and it was brought to my attention that the reason why toasted bagels exist is because it's for the people who can't get fresh bagels. So if you can't get a fresh New York, and I'm even going to give you New Jersey bagel when you walk in the morning, it's got to be toasted. But when it's made fresh daily, no need for the toast.
I will concede to that. Yeah.
So it's changed my perspective. So I'm not sure I could toast it. So it's been a little bit of a rough couple of weeks for me digesting this. But that's before we begin. I just want to mention, most importantly, and everybody should read the bio, as I always say. But I just want to point out that our guest today is or was a member of the U.S. Army's 82nd Airborne Division.
I was
a combat engineer. We're still going to say is. And the U.S. Army's 78th Infantry Division. So we're going to stay away from the drill instructor thing because that could take this podcast south.
Yeah.
But thank you for your service, really.
Oh, no. I'm no war hero, but I know a lot. But I appreciate it.
You're a better man than me. All right, let's jump in. I want to start there. I assume that your military service was earlier on in your career or in your life in the business world.
Yeah.
You were younger then?
Yeah, a lot younger, a long time, many lives ago. Yes, absolutely.
How has that experience impacted your approach to business, approach to success, dare I say approach to the failures? How has that experience impacted you?
Yeah, so it was absolutely pivotal. And for a bunch of different, and it's really weird because up until that point, I would say without question, a total underachiever. Up until that point in my life, total underachiever. I mean, I pretty much am Forrest Gump without the bubblegum shrimp money and without being at pivotal moments in history. But all the rest is pretty much Forrest Gump. I can't tell you that the areas of jobs and things that I've done. Coming out of high school, I worked. I didn't go to college. I didn't go to college until I was 25. But the military was kind of, and it wasn't even so much in basic training. I felt I barely made it through basic training not because of physicality, but more on just my mental state. I was not in a good place. And then, it just so funny because when I look at high school in my younger years of being pretty much aimless, I would say, and I started doing jobs and it was like, there's got to be something better than this. And I went from one bad job to another. When I say bad, I mean hard, really hard work. And then finally I said, I'm just going to go in the Army. And then it got worse again. And so I stopped saying to myself, what could be worse than this? I really stopped saying that right in the military space. But it wasn't until I really got into the 82nd Airborne where I realized something there. And that's where the change started. And it didn't happen overnight there, but that's really where it started because I realized in all the work that I've done and everything that I was doing, there was something very consistent. And that was, I had a good work ethic. There's two things. I had a good work ethic and I didn't want to let anybody down as far as, hold up my end. And kind of when I got into the 82nd Airborne, one of the things, I guess you see movies and you think people are yelling at you all the time and you got, but really what changed there as opposed to the basic training and all the other stuff was that a lot of it was on you because you were there with other people and you had to hold up your end of the deal, right? More than anything else. it was, you couldn't let other people down, because if you did, in a time of a war, people would die, or things wouldn't happen the way they're supposed to happen. So I think I learned there that, and that's when I really started to find more of myself saying, it's like, wow, I'm way more capable than I ever thought, or I ever gave myself credit. Definitely low self-esteem going in there. And that's that was a pivotal for that reason. Not, oh, they taught me all this stuff, and it really was more, I found myself there. And it was interesting because I found myself there, but I decided that I didn't belong there. I didn't stay in the Army. And it was weird because a lot of people are saying, I can't believe you're getting out. You just seem like a lifer to me. You know what I mean? You're a lifer. I can't believe you're not staying here. And I'm like, nah, I think it's time for me to go. And I did, but that was the beginning. And when I got out, I went back to my old job. I used to sell beer. I was a beer salesman. Prior to that, I drove a beer truck. But anyway, I knew I wanted to do something different. And that's kind of what my girlfriend, which ended up being my wife, she was finishing her degree, and she said, you should just go back to school. And I'm like, go back to school? I never took an SAT in my life. I was a terrible student, but I knew I wasn't stupid. And I did. I went back to school. And, I think I was Dean's List the whole time, and I graduated, a couple years later, and I was in the reserves. That's where I became a drill instructor, and that was pivotal too, because that is where something I learned. And I was just telling a group of young people earlier this week, is once again, you see the movies and the yelling and all. The reason they're yelling and screaming all the time is because if you think about it, they're on a set schedule for a cycle, which could be 8 weeks, it could be 16 weeks, whatever. Every minute of every day is planned perfectly, and you can't mess it up as a drill instructor. You got to be there. Your people got to eat. They got to shoot. They got to qualify. If your people don't qualify, you have a 2% fallout rate. You're bad. You know what I mean? So it's so much pressure. And you are marching to a tune of every minute of every day. You got to do something. You got to be right on time. So it was project management 101, right? That's the true project manager, is a drill instructor. So those two things, I think that's kind of really where I launched. And going back to school, as I realized I was really good at school. I'm still not as book smart as I'd like to be, but I'm book smart and street smart. So that's kind of where things launched. I think I was really 25 years old, maybe even a little older, before I really figured out what I was going to do and who I was.
There's so much to unpack there. And thank you for sharing that. But I'm struck by two things. I'm struck first and foremost by the fact that someone who was a terrible student by your own admission, and
terrible.
I'm a New Yorker, so I have thick skin. If I'm saying something incorrect, please correct me. But yet you decided to go back to school. I find something amazing there, but I think that the key to that, and this to me was I don't even know if you realize the impact or what you were saying, how impactful the statement would be, but you said that when you joined the military, your mental state was not really where it should have been.
Yeah.
And your focus wasn't really where it needed to be.
Yeah.
Yet you still had the discipline for what I'll call ulterior reasons and motives, i.e. not to let other people down.
Mm-hmm.
And serving for others, meaning not to let them down, not for your own success, ultimately led to you finding that diligence or that focus or that hustle, which then, and this is a crazy part, full circle moment, turns you into a Dean's List student.
Yeah.
A person's IQ cannot increase in the military. An IQ is an IQ.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it wasn't like you were an A student before and then you got to Dean's List. You're describing a total change and evolution, yet none of that had to do with school.
No.
None of that had to do with what was evolving. And I think that there's something to that in all people's lives.
Yes.
When we talk about keep hustling, it's sometimes the things you're doing, you don't even realize the impact they're having. You have to do them. You said you had a good work ethic. You had to keep those things going. You have to do what you had to do first and foremost for others, then for yourself, right? If it was just for the others, you would have stayed. Then you left the military. Then you made the Dean's List thing. So serving others, doing things that have seemingly no relationship or relation to ultimately your studies, then led to that. And it's just an amazing thing when people want to give up or when people think that there's only one route to success.
And it's so funny that last week, one of the things I do try to spend as much time as I can volunteering in high schools and things like that, for people that are studying be entrepreneurs or business and things, in that nature. And this same group of kids that I was telling a story to, there was the person that invited me to do this was doing this with a bunch of entrepreneurs with these kids. And they wrote up a narrative of it. And that was the narrative. The narrative was they were shocked at how, and I kept telling them, you don't realize no matter what experience you have, you will learn something, and never think that you're not taking away something from any experience. I used to make cinder blocks. That was my first job out of school, high school. I made cinder blocks. And, I look back and talk about work. I hated it, but every day I got up, I went to work. You know what I mean? But what I really learned there is something I didn't have, which is patience, because the old Sicilian guy that owned that place was brutal. He was brutal. And, you sat there and, it was a living, and you took it in and you listened. And I finally realized, like, this guy's mad. He's not really mad at me. He's mad at everything else, something else. It's not me. But I think that, when you look at keep hustling, everything, and even moving forward, because this isn't even, there's other hard times in life. This wasn't only it. And it's like everybody, you have to keep moving. You got to keep moving. You got to keep doing something. It's almost like even physically, as you get older, you got to keep moving. If you stop moving, nothing good comes from stop moving.
I assume you're going to say that and you mentioned this about yourself, so I assume it kind of works for others, that one of the most important traits you can have is that work ethic, is that constantly moving forward.
Yeah, it's hard, because I think that, especially in I think it might have been easier years ago. It is difficult now for these kids, and I say this to them, it's important to have a good work ethic. If I had to say anything, I would say that the perseverance, of course, but having that work ethic and doing a good job, I would say, to me, in my experience, was one of the key to successes for me. And it still is to this day, working honestly. I don't think you can sit there and say you got to work 800 hours a week, as much as, if you're there, you do, you do what you have to do and get your job done, and focus on the big picture and seeing how you can help others, So I'd say work ethic is a very big thing for me. Yeah. For me,
I assume you're going to say it's something lost in this generation.
No, here's what I'll say is that it is, but I'm not as down on this on the Z's and the A's as much as other people, because I try to spend a lot of time with them. They're smart. They're in a different place. And I think part of the reason they lose this work ethic, or what appears to be the work ethic, is it's our fault. We did this to them. But yeah, in a certain way, I think it's, they don't realize. In other words, it's the way I look at the Z's and the A's are, they're very much, they don't toe the line of yes sir, no sir, 3 bags full, as when you're growing up as a Gen X or I'm the end of the baby boomers, and you had to put the suit on and go in and toe the line. They're not like that. They question authority immediately. And it seems like they want to go to the top. They do right away. But this whole generation, these generations are they question authority immediately, and they don't care who you are or what you are. In other words, I'm going to say that to prove themselves to them, but it's just a different, and I don't know where it comes from. I think it's just how fast how fast things are moving, and a lack of focus, and they don't really have the time, and they're just rushing through things. But it's just different. I don't think it means to be disrespected, but it does come off that way a lot of times, I have to say.
So how do we teach it?
Yeah.
How do we inspire it?
Yeah. It's so I see it so funny, because in my work, I come across this a lot of times. I'm a consultant. So when we go into businesses to help them with maybe ERP or their technical problem, almost every project, they'll throw me the youngest person, or the person that doesn't have as much experience, to me, and it's usually a young person. And almost every time I've had these people, I find them absolutely brilliant and helpful. But here's the two things, and this is a perfect example of a person that I come into a big mechanical services business, a couple $100 million business, and we have to change their financial platform. And they give me this kid who's in payroll. He's a financial student, and he's working in payroll. Long story short, he's great with analytics, great with pulling numbers together, and that's what I need. Here's what I need. He works like better than 3 people 8 hours a day. But during lunch, you can't call him. He's out, and he may be sitting in a parking lot. Don't call him on his phone. And when at 5 o'clock, he's out the door, he's gone. But between those hours, and this is I was talking to CFO, the CFO was like, I love that kid, but I'm like, this is what it is. During that period of time, that kid does more work than 3 people here said. So this is what you have to take. You got to take, and not all of them are like that. I'm just saying.
So you're saying like inspire what's within each individual. The value of mentorship, I would say, is what's lost.
And I did. And here's the thing. I left 18 months after I left that job. They created an assistant controller position for him. So he went from payroll probably in less than 3 years to the assistant controller of a business. And he knows everything. I mean, I go, it's really, he didn't want to take the project. I said, when you're done with this project, you're going to know every piece of this business and how it runs. Every piece, because we got to go through it all. And he did, and he listened, and he did everything I asked him to do, and he gave me everything I asked. Just in a period, it had to be in that, and it couldn't be on a Saturday or Sunday or after 5 o'clock. But during those business hours, he gave me everything, so that's what I work with.
I know you're going to say it has to do with discipline, but I want to read some
Sure.
quick bits from your bio, and I'm just going to ask you to just dive in there.
Mm-hmm.
He, referring to you, quickly realized that growth alone does not solve problems. In many cases, it exposes them. I'm going to skip a couple lines. Instead of chasing quick fixes, he, again referring to you, became focused on understanding how businesses truly function and how leaders can scale without creating dysfunction. I agree with you 100% wholeheartedly that it is incredibly rare to find someone in any business whose dream it was, whose focus it was, and whose training was in leadership. Because if it was, they never would have been at the bottom.
Right.
How can somebody who's not yet at the top, or who's moving to the top, or who's just getting into that leadership, embrace it, but also cultivate the opportunity that they have so that they don't create that dysfunction when that's, I think we'll agree, that's natural. Like, what are you supposed to do? I hate to, go to a place that people don't want me to go to on this podcast, but maybe I will. In one of the greatest pieces of cinematography in United States history, Tommy Boy. I mean, right? He didn't want to sell car parts, but he had to deal with that whole thing, right? He didn't want to be thrust into that role, and obviously it was comedic how it ended, how the whole thing played out. But most leaders, it might not be tragic like that, but most leaders, that's it. One day you turn around, you have a staff, you have people depend not only working for you, but depending on you. So how can people create within themselves the ability that then when that leap happens, there's no minor leagues, right? When you jump into the majors, how can you make it, how can you be the most successful?
Yeah. So there's a lot there. So there's a couple things that I would say that I think are critical. One is you have to get outside help. And I don't mean me like a consultant. I mean, I'm an entrepreneur organization, there's Vistage, and there's places to go to help you talk with other people in your position, or business coaches or things like that. I am big on that, to get outside perspective and different. And I wish I did it sooner. I really did. It was one of the biggest mistakes in my life, in my professional career, is not seeking out help sooner. That's number one. Number two is, and this is really hard, I think, and I'm just speaking from my experience because I can't really speak for other people. And I don't know where the light switch is for people, but I preach this a lot now. You have to build your business to run without you right away, as soon as you can. That is one of the biggest things that it's hard, because most entrepreneurs are accidental, as the E-Myth, it's thrust upon them, as you said, because one day, they'll start a business, it's small, and then before you know it, it's scaling up. And they're doing everything. And it's like, you know what? I can't walk away from this, because if I walk away from this, or I'm not here, this doesn't happen. And then they hire people to help them. And typically they hire themselves when they don't need themselves. They need somebody different than themselves, at some point. There's, and I'm guilty. I'm telling you everything I'm guilty of in my first business. I probably will write a book about it. But you hire yourself, like sales. I fired more salespeople than probably fill a stadium up with them.
It's so funny you say that, because it's not exactly hiring people, but I'm often asked. I'm blessed to work with my mother every single day, and I worked in a family with my father. He rest me started our business until he passed. And he worked with us every day till he passed away 3 years ago. And people often ask me how they made it work, and I think the real answer is they were both in the insurance industry. When they got married, they knew they were going to work together and they had no choice. And I say that they were so polar opposites and they were so complementary to each other, but there's no way before they started working together that they knew that 100%. And if my mother would tell you that, then she's lying, and I would never call my mother a liar. But you know what I'm saying? In that
Yes.
I watched them. I came into the business. They were working together at that point for 25 years.
Mm-hmm.
And there was this synergistic yin and yang.
Yeah.
That they described to me was not always like that, for sure.
Right.
But it's almost like you want to hire, very often people want to hire their replica.
They do. I did.
But you're saying they shouldn't. You're saying you should really hire the complement.
Really, no. Especially when you're looking at like engineering, and we were a technical firm. This one is too, but that one, I had my first technical person when we started the company, and when I sold the company, they were still there. I kept good technical people or we did, I should say, because I had two co-founders with me. But I think the best way to look at it, and I think that, and it's not the only way to look at it, but are you familiar with traction, Gino,
Sure.
with DOS?
Sure.
So it's the integrator and the visionary. That's the best way to look at it. You have to have a visionary and you have to have an integrator. The visionary, and everybody likes to say they're both, but they're not. There's very few people that I am an integrator. There's no question. The problem in my first business, I think all three of us were integrators. There was no visionary. So, you have to have the person that has the ideas and that vision, but typically that person dreams too big, and the integrator is there to say, pull it back a little and make it happen.
That was literally my parents. My parents. My father was the dreamer and the innovator, and my mother was like, "What?" Or I think the best partnership is the one who says, the innovator says, "This is what I'm thinking," and the integrator says, "Not stop, but this is what we can do. This is what we can't do. This is how we can do it. This is how we can't do it." And when the two respect or view the value, right?
Yeah.
Most of the time, the innovator says, "I can replace the integrator," when that's not true, and the integrator says, "I can replace the innovator." I know the nuts and bolts of this thing.
No.
But they really both need to know each other.
Oh, absolutely, 100%. That's the trick. So I think that when you're coming up, and it's hard because you don't know when do you make when do I start to look for this person, and it's always a money thing, because when they need it, they're at a point where the business is doing good, but not good enough. I got to bring in another person that's going to, it's always that part. And I think that's the hard thing. And that's where you need help, outside help. That's where fractionals come in. I mean, that's what this current business, what we're doing is that fractional CIO, CTO thing. Your businesses are scaling and they're at a point, but it's like the CIO is not a CFO, and it's not a COO, and it's not a CEO. So it's the last of the C's. And, people are like, well, I don't, I have money for that. And I think that these fractional services are there for that reason. Good ones, obviously, because you're eventually going to need that at some point in the growth trajectory, depending on where you're at. So I think that's some of the mistakes I made in the first business, was not having the visionary, and not recognizing I was missing that. But I think in the other thing, that the positive thing we did was I did replace myself. The business was running without me day to day, where I had to be there, sitting there, even though I was there. And it got to the point where they wish I wasn't there, probably, which is a good thing. But that it's really hard. It is. I see it every day. It's really hard to walk away from, taking your hands off. It's my baby. Yeah. They're going to dress it up in different clothes, but it's still going to be your baby. That's the hard part. I don't want it wearing a hat. I don't want it wearing, I want it wearing, this, and it's like, now, they'll do, somebody else will do a good job, but it's just not doing it the way you do it.
I love that. I got to ask before we wrap up.
Yeah.
Where does compass left come from?
So it's an obscure military term that probably only means something to me, but I'm left-handed. And
me too.
88% of people aren't. So if you take a compass in land navigation and you walk on an azimuth without point-to-point, meaning you're just walking at 180 degrees, the farther you walk, the farther you'll end up to the right of your destination, because right-handed people pull to the right. So compass left is pulling you back onto track. And it only really means something to me. Most people don't, but it means a lot.
I love that. And from one lefty to another, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Wow. There's a lot to digest here. So
there's a lot I could talk about. I apologize. But,
no, I love it. I love
yeah.
this. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing and thank you for being here and thank you for inspiring me and our listeners. Joe, as you know, I have a closing tradition on this podcast where we ask our guests to leave us with their favorite motivational or inspirational quote, what it means to them. I am gearing up for this one because I know it's going to be a good one. So with that, I'll say thank you again for being here and the floor is yours.
Well, first of all, thank you very much. It was an honor and a pleasure. I'm going Teddy Roosevelt, and I'll paraphrase a little here. The best thing you could do is the right thing. The next best thing you could do is the wrong thing. And the worst thing you could do is nothing.
Absolutely love that. And that is Keep Hustling.
That's Keep Hustling.
This has been another episode of Keep Hustling. Remember, do well by doing good. And of course, and always, keep hustling. All right, hustlers, that brings us to the end of another fantastic episode. Thank you for listening. The listeners are the most important part of this show. If you like what you heard, please leave us a review wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Your feedback means the world to us and helps us reach more listeners. Plus, be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you never miss an episode. We have some amazing guests and topics lined up for you, and we don't want you to miss out. And finally, if you have any suggestions, comments, or even just want to say hello, please feel free to reach out to us on all social media platforms. We are Keep Hustling Pod on Instagram, X, Facebook, and LinkedIn. We would love to hear from you to continue the conversation. Thanks again for tuning in and supporting our podcast. We truly appreciate each and every one of you. Until next time, stay curious, stay hungry, and keep hustling.